Hello and welcome to Next 2.0 on WQLN PBS NPR. Next is produced by the Public's Voice Media. I am your host, Marcus Atkinson, and I'm here with my guest host, Chuck Camerata. If you want to know more about Next 2.0, you can go to Facebook and like the page. You can also follow us on Instagram at Next 2.0 Erie. There, you can keep up with upcoming show promos, events, and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today is just open conversation. It's a lot going on in the news right now, and this is one of those moments where Chuck and I like to just kind of slow down and say, what in the world is going on in the world? Because it seems like the news is coming at us in rapid fire. So as we are always developing new shows, we like to slow down and do just this. Say, what's going on? What did you think of that? How's that playing out? And we brought back a special guest just to kind of help us have this open banter, this open conversation. Jeff Bloodworth. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
It's great to be here.
And Jeff is on his way to Gaza soon, and we will unpack that very soon. But Chuck, we'll start with you. What's on your mind, Chuck?
All kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I guess you have to kind of talk about the verdict, don't you?
You have to.
And what's going on with that and the kind of craziness surrounding that.
Which
verdict?
I'm serious, because I don't think we podcast about Trump yet.
Yeah, you know, I was so I did a little bit of looking into this particular verdict. Between 1996 and 2016, when he came to office, he had over 4,000 lawsuits filed against him of one sort or another, from things like sexual assault to business frauds and breach of contract and personal defamation. It's 4,000. That's over 100 a year. It's craziness. 200 a year. It's almost a lawsuit a day for that period of time, to say nothing of what's going on now. So the whole idea that this guy is being wrongly persecuted and targeted by the left, just kind of crazy in my mind. So what do you do when you know your guy did something? You obfuscate and you lie and you misdirect and you try to deflect to other things, and that's kind of what's happening out there, at least as far as I see right now. Am I wrong?
Jeff, is he wrong?
He is not wrong. I mean, this is the Trump playbook, which is to always be on offense and to never admit any wrongdoing. I mean,
yeah, he's never done a sin. I mean, we had that whole conversation. I never did anything I need to be forgiven for. Are you kidding me?
it is, we're so tribal, and you've got to think that a huge number of his ardent supporters, deep in their hearts, they know he's guilty, but they just, and it's part of the game. Yeah. I think they enjoy kind of owning the libs by refusing the truth in front of their eyes. I mean, there's a certain percentage who believe him. I kind of don't think that's a huge number of his supporters, but it's a terrible sign of the times. We're just so tribal.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, you can say with Capone, and was it tax evasion? Was it Capone?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I would bring that case. You're going to get him on that. There's a ton of other stuff he's done, right?
Yeah.
This just happens to be the thing that they got him on.
Yeah.
My question is, what does this do? So even right now, they're trying to hunt him down about his own personal gun. You are now a felon. You're not allowed to own a gun.
Yeah.
You have to turn said gun in. And that's become a thing. And I'm surprised the attorney didn't have him just do it, very easily so it doesn't turn into a situation. But they're right. You're a felon. You can't own a gun. I'm thinking about the millions of Americans, many of which look like me, who check that box and say I'm a felon, so I can't get this job that I need, whether it's stuffing the fries or at UPS or whatever else.
Being president of the United States.
Now you can check the box and be president. Yeah. And I don't say that to be facetious. We got to really figure this out.
Yeah.
The emprezzlement of the U.S. government and the constituency around this man has been maddening.
Yeah.
And at some point, you have to slow down and say, now, wait a minute. How many rule changes as a society are we willing to undergo to accommodate this man's style? Because once again, this gives way to a greater conversation to me. So what do we do about the rest of felons?
It's not a matter of this man's style, in my mind. It's a matter of
this is true. Wrong choice of words.
Character.
It's character. You're right. No, you're right.
It goes to the depth of who he is and the kind of people that we want to have leading us. So in order to deflect, we find people like Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, well, the guy I worship is also a felon. And so she's equating Trump to Jesus.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things that drives me a little bit crazy as a pastor, that we're not seeing just how this man's character is so destructive to our society, and we're holding him up as an example of what?
Yeah.
I mean, if we're equating him to Jesus, I mean, I want to know what Jesus you're equating him to. Are you equating him to the Jesus who was convicted of in a court of law of harassing Jean Carroll,
Exactly,
or of rape, and was told us to pay $80 million to her for the hurt that he caused her? Are we talking about the Jesus who falsified documents to hide his hush money payment to a porn star, or the Jesus who suggested that foreigners aren't even people, or the Jesus who has literally thousands? I was telling the two of you before we went on air about the 4,000 cases that were filed against Trump in the 17 years before he became president, or the Jesus who talked about grabbing women by the private parts, or the Jesus who said sometimes you just got to take revenge on people. I mean, how does any of that
Jesus
look like Jesus?
A porn star that he adulterated with for all of 2 minutes. Very virile man.
We could spend the entire program.
Very, very virile man. So virile.
We could spend the entire program talking about the weaknesses and the lack of character of this man, the criminality that has followed him through all of his years. And I feel like I'm going overboard on that, but I'm not making stuff up. I'm just pointing out what the facts are about this guy.
And I'll just say this, Marjorie Taylor Greene wasn't exaggerating. I mean, we call it a cult very often. He is being deified right now.
He is, and he's taking it. He's fine with it.
Exactly. He's in the category of your David Koresh's and these other, charismatics who have gotten this following. And he has figured out a while ago, whoa, this has gone beyond admiration. He knows he's being deified by millions of people. So as crazy as what she said sounds, she wasn't lying. I mean, and she's proven that this is my God. She's doing everything she can. She wants to get in that vice presidential chair so bad, boy. Oh, my goodness. If he said go and, beat down Stormy Daniels next time you see her on the street, she'd be on CNN right now catching that beat down. Jeff, the Supreme Court justices, oh, my God, they're getting backed in corners left and right. Impartiality be damned. What's going on here?
I'm not the biggest fan of recording private conversations with Supreme Court justices. That kind of gotcha journalism. But, what Sam Alito said, where he, essentially kind of came out publicly as a right-wing culture warrior. I mean, you're a Supreme Court justice. You're supposed to, there are thousands of people who are have the kind of credentials to be on the court. The 9 people on the court, we choose them for their character above all, and having the judgment when you're out in public to not say such, ideological and just frankly partisan things. Right. And that's what's so he's, revealed himself. John Roberts, by way of contrast.
Absolutely.
You can disagree with him ideologically or not, but this is somebody who belongs on the court.
That's what I was going to say. Yep.
Right or left, that's what you want, is a John Roberts of liberal or conservative.
Right. And
Samuel Alito, it's not his ideology; it's his poor character.
And don't we see that with Clarence Thomas as well? And so you have 2 out of the 7, 2 out of the 9 who are very clearly being influenced by forces outside the court, and who appear to be bribable. And even if they're not, even if they weren't, that appearance undermines the authority of the court and the respect for the court, which I think is fundamental to governing. People won't, if they don't respect the decisions of the court.
Well, the thing about it is when I look at situations like that, when you see people in power, male or female, I mean, being mindful of the fact we have our first female vice president, and so now we have a first husband, I guess we want to say, Doug, is whoever the spouse of these people are, they recognize the fact that they're in a team and their actions reflect their spouse, right? I'm always paying attention to that person next to them. And with both of these Supreme Court justices, it was the actions of their wives that put them on the radar. Clarence Thomas did enough dirt on his own. Enough of his own stuff came out. But Jenny Thomas going back and forth on January 6th with then President Trump's team, actively being a part of that January 6th thing, making it completely clear she was a part of MAGA Nation, right?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
It is.
And then you've got Alito's wife, who in theory was the one who suggested flying the flag. You heard the recording with her. You know, you got the pride flag flying, and I'm going to fly my flag. You're that petty, and you are the spouse of someone who is charged with making impartial decisions for the country.
Yep.
Lady, if you are this person, learn to shut up. This is your husband's livelihood.
Yeah. And the three of us are all married, so we kind of get that you can't be in a relationship with somebody. You can't be in a lifelong committed relationship without being somewhat influenced by that person.
Yeah.
And my wife's views make a huge difference to me. She's always talking to me about how she thinks about things, and sometimes serving as corrective to me. But those views have an impact. And if the views of your spouse are very much one-sided, right-wing, that's going to have an impact. And I don't know how you're not impacted by that.
Yeah, the fish, rots at the head. And what I mean by that is we look at America's elite classes and the way that, and I'm sure it must happen on the left as well. We know about these two Supreme Court justices and their spouses. And it's revelatory of an elite class that doesn't have any self-control, doesn't respect the institutions, and is just imbibing in their worst kind of ideological excesses. And America had many faults in the past, many faults. But I think to my grandparents' generation, just how they would have been ashamed to have behaved like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's great that America has changed in many positive ways over the past 40, 50 years. But we've also, I think, lost a sense of sort of adulting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
When Nixon was on the verge of being impeached, who was it who came to him and convinced him to walk away? It was his party's leaders. They came in and said, you can't do this anymore. And there was a level of integrity about that's missing today.
It is, and this goes back to the empretzlement that I'm talking about.
I love that word, by the way.
you are the party of law and order, right? Nixon, I think, started beating that drum. You're the party of law and order. You're the party of family values.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Character matters.
Character matters. All of these things. You have literally reimagined in all the worst ways your party in order to match the debased character of this candidate. And it's so sad to watch. I mean, at some point you would hope that somebody, we've watched some people have their come to Jesus moments, when it comes to President Trump in the Republican Party. But to have them toe the line consistently, many of them haven't. This is one of those moments. I hate that John McCain is gone.
Yeah, me too.
John McCain had the chutzpah to say, what are we doing?
Yeah.
He is not it. This is not who we are.
It's amazing, isn't it, that the rationality on the right comes from people like Liz Cheney. And that the party immediately vomits those people out of the party. So Liz Cheney's kicked out of the Republican Party in Wyoming, and what was his name? Adam Kinzinger, same kind of thing. He's out. I listened to a candidate or a congressman named Burt, John Burt, maybe. He was on being interviewed on a show that I watch, and he's a Republican who's no longer in office, and he said, today you can't be in office if you can't win as a Republican if you don't do fealty to Trump. because he was being asked, why won't people stand up? And if the goal is to win, if the goal is to get elected, you have to do that. You have to do fealty to Trump. And that's become the litmus test on the right. There's nothing else.
Right.
The lesson for me of the Trump era is not that Donald Trump is morally challenged. We knew that if you're paying attention in the 1980s.
Yeah.
The lesson for me in the Trump era is how cheaply good people sell their integrity. And to me, Donald Trump holds a mirror to society, and I see this in my own life.
That is so true.
People not, and again, outside of politics, people not saying what is true and right in order to advance professionally.
That's right.
And I don't know if it's worse today than it used to be, because as a historian, we don't like to say things like that because it's not provable. But I see that, and I don't know about the two of you, I see that throughout institutions that I deal with.
Yeah.
I don't talk about my outside life very much when I'm on the microphone, but I have been known to be a truth teller behind closed doors, and it is resented lately.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Yeah.
To your point, Jeff, there are so many things playing out in society right now because there's a trickle down right here in Erie, and I'm sure there are in other cities, and you have powerful people that are straddling the fence in terms of what's right and what's wrong, and they're becoming more brazen in terms of, yeah, we see the flaws in it, so what? No, there's no so what, especially if you're a person who makes major decisions and is in control of major pots of money, especially government money. And so I'm with you 1,000%. I think that him holding a mirror to society, that is a wonderful way of putting it, because it is 100% true. He is just drawing out what's actually there. And the scary thing about it is all of these things are so intertwined, which goes back to, are we witnessing the fall of America?
Yep.
I'm going to plug that in every chance I
Marcus
get.
and I did a program on that 6 months ago or something. And
Are we witnessing the fall of America? And so you've got the justice system is rigged, and these people, they're going after people, after their political opponents, and we've got to do something about this. And, I'm found guilty on 34 counts. Enter Hunter Biden's trial.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
President's son, and jury deliberates. 6 right off the back say, yeah, I think the prosecution's proven their case. The other 6, not so much. And then 5 come along, and then they have to lobby the 12th, and then eventually they come back with a guilty verdict. And now, ex-President Trump, what say you?
Yeah.
Because he set the wheels in motion.
Yep.
With this investigation. Biden turns down, his team turns down the plea deal, and here we are. I've got to say this, though, and I would be remiss if I didn't. And I'm sure you two can say the same thing. On both sides of my family, my mom's side, my father's side, especially when they were talking about, Hunter being addicted to crack, we've had that monster ravage our family. Man, listen, I remember, and I'll tell you a personal story. Because the rise of crack hit in the late 80s, mid-late 80s. I'm a teenager of the 80s, right? Graduated in 1988. 88, most crack-addicted babies in the country were born in 88. It was eclipsed in 89. None of us had any idea the collateral damage that crack would cause. Even though, and I want you to hear this clearly, listener, even though I had 2 strong working-class parents, I hustled and tried it because I saw too much fast money being made. All of us, me and my friends talk about it all the time. All of us tried it, not knowing that it would literally destroy neighborhoods and lives.
Yeah.
Nobody knew how lethal crack was, right? I'll never forget, during this experimental phase of my life, I go to this person's house who owes me money because I've sold him this thing and he hadn't paid me. I gave it to him on credit, and I go to his door. His wife answers the door with his baby in her arms, and she holds a sign to the door, "Your money is in the mailbox. Please don't hurt my husband."
Wow. Yeah.
Got rid of the rest of the product that I had, left it alone. Fast forward years later, and we've watched our neighbors' mamas and uncles and siblings and children get addicted to this stuff, and it makes you somebody else.
Yeah, it does. And then comes along, Jeff talked about this in the episode that he did a couple of weeks ago, the opioid crisis.
Yes.
And it ravages communities, maybe more so in rural areas than the crack addiction. But
Yeah.
it just,
And I'm not making any excuses for him, but I feel the need to humanize Hunter in that way. I'm like, okay, he's convicted. I don't, people look at Trump. This is a man who doesn't drink because of what he did to his brother, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got this man in all of his senses doing everything under the sun wrong
yeah,
because he's self-centered.
yeah.
Biden, whether it was Biden or whoever else, you talk about addiction to a lethal substance like that. Come on, where you lied on his application. The man was getting high. Have you ever dealt with a relative getting high?
Yeah.
Your television's gone. Your car's been pawned off. I'm not being facetious.
No, that's exactly right. Your whole life is ruined.
Your whole life is ruined.
Yeah.
There's no boundaries. They're addicted.
Yeah. What do you do with? Yeah. So there's Hunter Biden being subjected to the rule of law and accepting it, and then there's Trump, who has avoided the consequences of law for most of his life. We knew he was a criminal in some respect in the 80s, as you said, Jeff, but he's never been held accountable, partly because of his wealth, partly because, I don't know, partly because of his connections, whatever. And now, for the first time, when he gets challenged, when he gets held accountable, now we have, well, he's being persecuted like Jesus was.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you what, Jeff, before we bring you back into this, I mentioned this in the show before, that growing up during the birth of hip-hop, he was mentioned in a ton of rap songs because we viewed him as a business outlaw. Because the hood was full of business outlaws. Right?
Well, I'm Italian, and we talked about him in the same way that we talked about the Capones of the world. He
Right.
he is a capo. He's a mafia boss.
Yeah.
And his organization looks like that, and he's been able to avoid consequences in
Yeah.
the same way that those folks did.
Yeah.
So he has not just the patina. He has the substance of
Yeah.
a criminal who has found a way to get away with everything.
And it might be cute for pop culture folklore. Presidency, Jeff, not so much.
No, it is. I mean, Trump is in many ways, he can't help himself but say things like he lies as easily as he breathes.
Yes.
But then he'll also tell the truth, right? And it's always many times a projection. So they talk about the Biden crime family, and the entire Trump empire is built upon, just graft and corruption. And not to say that the Bidens have not cashed in on their powerful, kind of father, which is very true and ugly. But again, this is sadly a portrait of America in 2024.
Yeah, absolutely right.
And I don't want to, I find it icky, how the Biden family have cashed in on the father. But Trump, it's projection. The Biden crime family, they're really talking about the Trump family.
Yeah.
Which is, they're trading his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, dealing with the Saudis. I mean, it's just icky.
Yeah.
But there's just so much with
Yeah.
Donald Trump, and most Americans I understand why they tune it out. I mean, you're totally right about Hunter Biden. Like millions of Americans, like my family, when I hear about Hunter Biden, I'm like, oh wow, I have a cousin.
Yeah.
I have, my dad. Like I see
Deaths
that.
of despair.
Yeah. But I think a lot of Americans, they're like, oh gosh, just a pox on both their houses, because they see the trial. If you pay attention to it, then, Hunter Biden broke the law.
Yeah.
He should pay the consequences.
Yeah.
He's being held to a higher standard because his dad's the president.
Yeah.
But, I think that's a little bit fair.
Ooh, let's run with what you just said, because
Higher
that's been my
standard.
issue. That's my issue, because you're absolutely right, and as well it should be. He's held to a higher standard because
Absolutely.
he's the president's son.
Meanwhile,
this has been my issue, right? Even him lobbying the Supreme Court, not even lobbying, flat out petitioning the Supreme Court, I should be, immune from prosecution during any decisions I made while I was in office. Yeah. Don't you agree, Supreme Court? And a couple of them are actually like, well, I'm like, no, this should be a flat out no.
Yeah.
To whom much is given, much is required. What's the Spider-Man quote? With great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
I dispute that. With great power comes perks. Perks.
Yeah.
Power comes with perks. So yeah,
you're getting better at that. That impression is growing on me.
He's such a cartoonish character to me.
He really is.
But you're right. That's the part that and now you have Biden with the executive, and all of this is just this gumbo, this jambalaya of where we going with this.
Yeah.
So now you got Biden with the border.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's executive order. And he's trying to asylum. People would run over the border. They'd find the border patrol, hand themselves in, asylum, wait for their trial. They're going to give you a trial date. You can wait here in the country. And they'll go find an auntie, and they'll do it. And that trial might not hit for a year, 2 years more.
Yeah.
No more of that.
Just one example of systemic brokenness in our society. There's so many things for us to talk about systemically. The corruption that we're talking about here, the influence peddling, the insider trading that goes on because Congress people know something, and so they can get ahead of the curve and make more. That's not just a Republican thing. That Nancy Pelosi, it's across the board that these people are making huge amounts of money. Menendez and his wife, on being people of power.
Power bro.
And
all day long.
But for me, the question becomes, what is the whole of the culture doing right now? What's happening to us culturally and politically? And so when we look at that particular corruption and what it's speaking to us about our society, I think it's telling us that we're moving into a phase of just kind of lawlessness, and the rule of law is going by the board. We have a lot of work to do, but we have to start by saying no to the worst of the characters out there. And right now, the household is being run by the spoiled little 3-year-old.
Yeah.
And that's a bad recipe for a healthy household.
With some of this stuff that you're describing, I mean, we're here now broadcasting live from not live, but we're recording from a local coffee shop, right? We have the ability to go anywhere we want because of technology. We have a place right now where if you go to an Airbnb, which is now a rival for hotels, wasn't heard of back in the day. We had bed and breakfast back in the day. So I guess this is the modern day equivalent. You've got to make sure or scan. I've got a little device where you can scan for hidden cameras when I go to Airbnbs.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because I want to make sure that the owner of the Airbnb is not filming my daughter and my wife when I'm at the
absolutely.
Airbnb. And so you got the Supreme Court justices that are being secretly recorded. My point is this. Everything you just described, Chuck, it's been going on for years.
Absolutely.
We now have fancy devices that say we get to see and hear everything that's going on.
Yeah.
And somebody, because there's popularity in this thing, if you get the right tweet, the right post, the right soundbite, and it goes viral, you can find yourself as a pundit on CNN. So everybody's looking for the gotcha moment.
Absolutely.
If Chuck Camarada's there, and I'm going to secretly record Chuck.
Yeah.
Did Jesus really die on the cross? And if he gives the wrong answer, I'm giving it to his church.
Yeah.
But these things have been happening for years, and it's sad that we're now listening in or seeing the conversations, and it's disappointing. To your point, Jeff, everybody has a price, it feels like, even good people.
Yeah, it is. Look, this is just human nature, right? We're corrupted. But so I'm writing a biography of a former Speaker of the House. I'm about 3/4 of the way through it. He was Speaker during Watergate, Majority Leader during the 1960s. He's from rural Oklahoma, right? A liberal from rural Oklahoma, Carl Albert. This tells, I think, a difference in our eras. Look, Lyndon Johnson was financially corrupt. We know this, right? So that used to happen all the time. There was a Supreme Court Justice, Abe Fortas, who was corrupt. At the same time, Carl Albert, Speaker of the House, second most powerful man in America. When he retired, did he stay in D.C.? Did he join corporate boards? Did he cash in? No. He moved back home to McAlester, Oklahoma, and had lived in his very modest home, right? I interviewed his daughter, and she lived in a very kind of modest home in Norman, Oklahoma. I mean, today that doesn't happen anymore, right? I mean, you leave Congress, you stay in D.C., you cash in. And there's something, Jimmy Carter, right? You think about Jimmy Carter. Where did he went back to Plains, Georgia.
He sure did.
Right? He was almost in bankruptcy.
Right.
And I think what Trump feeds on is this sense of Americans, and they're not wrong, that we look at an elite class that doesn't hold itself to a higher standard.
Right.
And so they look at that, and I can understand and think, well, I need to get mine.
Yeah.
You know? And I that the leadership, it filters down all the way to the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's again, that to me, that's another lesson of the Trump era, is that we see how, ordinary Americans, sell their integrity to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
We don't have a better example.
I have a question for you, Jeff. Continuing to struggle with the character of the nation, it seems to me like we have moved back towards an era when a relatively small elite, the oligarchs, the wealthy, the wealthiest among us, actually rule the country. And I remember listening to some things, reading some things that Teddy Roosevelt talked about back in the day, when in the day of the robber barons, when we were actually being ruled by the J.P. Morgans of the world, and he recognized that the rights of the individual, the average American, were being trampled on. People were working 12-hour days in the factory with no power, no unions, no way to push back against the robber barons. And so we began an era when regulation of corporations became a thing, when we would break up monopolies. And it feels to me like we're sliding back into that, or maybe we've never really departed from that. But as a historian, I'm curious about what you think.
The times that we live in are the late 19th century, or we call the Gilded Age 2.0.
Okay.
Hyperpartisanship, corrupt political class. This is what American democracy of the 2020s looked like in the 19th century. Rambunctious, ugly, violent, open, vile, racism and bigotry. The post-1945 world where we came of age is the exception in American life. And America's dynamism and boorishness, right? This is the yin and yang of who we are. And we lived through an era of dynamism, and in many ways, for all of our faults, that was the best side of America over the past 75 years. And what we're returning to is an ugly side of who we are. And this is on both sides of the political aisle. I mean, the Democratic Party, like if you look at you can do a huge percentage of the staff and the campaign staff and the leadership of the Democratic Party, the supposedly left, that represents the left of America. They all went to elite schools. And, it's the same kind of elite ruling class that I think Americans can't put it into words, but they somehow know that they're not able to break through that glass ceiling. And it's on both sides. And Trump is just the kind of the grossest example of this.
It almost feels like Trump is the guy that says, so Chuck, what you're describing, again, has been going on for a while. You're saying that, are we going back to that, or has it never changed? He's saying, look, let's make it official. We all know what it is. We all know what it is. At least in Russia and China, they're like, look, this is what it is. Get with it or go somewhere else. And I think that's where he's at, man. And people, and it goes back to that mirror. There's a lot of people in that class, politically and economically, that are like, yeah, we kind of run everything anyway. I'm tired of making the little guy feel like he matters. He doesn't.
Nope.
He doesn't. So why are we hiding it?
Well, I mean, we are hiding. We are pretending, but it's been raised. You were talking about technology and how, everything is on social media these days. Pretty hard to not be known for what you really think. And so it's out there. Trump is just owning it. Yeah, it's who I am. It gives us the opportunity as a culture to ask ourselves, is that who we want to be?
Of course.
And so the last 70 years that you're talking about, Jeff, versus what was before that and is increasingly us now, it gives us the chance to stand at this crossroads and say, are we going to feed the better angels of our nature? There's that great Native American mythology legend where the young boy is walking with his grandfather, and it's part of the education of the young boy to be taken to the wilderness for an experience, and part of that experience, this young boy says to the grandfather, "Grandpa, how do I be good?" And the grandfather's story is that there are two wolves in you. There's the wolf of good and there's the wolf of evil. And the young boy says, "Well, which one wins?" And the grandfather says, "The one you feed." Well, we're at that point of recognizing both of those things in ourselves, socially, across the board. All of us, it's human nature. It's not just Democrat or Republican. Maybe the GOP is feeding that selfish, boorish part of us more, proclaiming it more than on the left, but it's part of all of us. But who do we want to be?
Right. This guy's he's doing what Sammy the Bull Gravano did in some ways. Sammy the Bull was believable. His testimony was, because I was there with those guys while they were doing it.
Yeah.
I participated. So you can believe me because I was there. I remember this photo of back in the day, the Trumps and the Clintons, right? And you think about Trump when he was campaigning the first time around. He was in a debate, and it was at the Republican primary, and he was talking about how corrupt the system is. And he said, "I know the system is corrupt because I use it."
Yeah.
He came out and said, "Listen, this is what we, Democrat, Republican, we're doing this. We've been doing this." He, like Sammy the Bull, outed everything that was happening to his benefit. And so to your point, Chuck, all of these things that are going on in the background, they're all in it together. They're all in it together.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Marcus, I couldn't agree more how you're saying how Trump is basically saying, let's just be honest about who we are. And for people who are listening and you think, how do we kind of manage and fight against this? I'm going to tell a small story about my wife, who is a fairly well-known researcher who engages in plastic pollution, Dr. Sam Mason. And
she's amazing, by the way. We're going to have her on the show, Marcus.
So I've heard. We definitely have to do that.
She's groundbreaking and trailblazing. And so how do you fight against this? And it's about not selling your integrity. And I won't use any names, but she has recently left a job at a local university because what they tried to make her do is to sign off on research that said that, essentially plastic isn't bad for the environment, which was everything that she, is against everything she's ever researches and knows. And she had a choice, essentially, between being employed or doing something she knew was wrong. And what my wife did, and we decided in December, we sat down and we're like, well, you're not going to work there anymore. And it was an enormously hard. This is what integrity looks like, and it was enormously hard. And we took a leap out into the void of maybe she won't have a job. How do we manage? Now, she's going to land on her feet. We just found this out yesterday.
Good.
But this is how I think ordinary people, we manage and battle against the ugliness we see in American political life. Is, look, we have a public activism, and you name whatever political lead is doing something wrong, but in your private life, we have to return to doing the hard things again. And I there are more important things than a fancy car. I that's what I learned from my grandparents, despite all their faults, is that integrity comes first. And I think we've lost that a little bit in America.
I think so too.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Jeff, take us to Gaza, the decision to go to Gaza.
Yeah, this crazy person is going to Gaza. On Sunday.
That's a front burner issue. So, like a couple of days from now. What is that about?
15 or 20 years ago, I decided that I wanted to understand more about the Holocaust and genocide studies. And so I started doing a lot of workshops and seminars dealing with Jewish issues, which meant going to Israel quite a bit. And so I teach about the Holocaust and genocide studies. And part of that is I'm going to go to a workshop at the Holocaust Museum in Israel at Yad Vashem That's going to include, we're going to be going down to the south, actually. We're going to be at the border of Gaza. And I'm going to be writing about this for the Erie Reader. And what I've learned in going over to Israel 6, 7, 8 times and really delving into issues of genocide and Jewish studies is to no longer be pro-Israel or pro-Palestine, right? Is to be pro-peace.
Yeah.
And to recognize both sides are right,
Mm-hmm.
both sides are wrong. It's like a relationship, right, with your spouse.
Right.
If you start tabulating who's more right and who's more wrong, you've totally
get
lost the
anywhere.
narrative.
You're doomed. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
And so, how do you get? Because peace is possible. We know this, and what we have to do is quit taking a side, because that only helps the radicals on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to be pro-peace and empower the moderates in Israel and Palestine. And so I'm going to go there. Every time I go, I'm studying about the Holocaust and anti-Semitism, of course. But I'm going to be going into the West Bank. I'm going to be writing about this and trying to portray both sides. And that's kind of become one of my missions, is to understand the mushy middle.
Yeah.
And to stop the warfare, right?
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
what we're doing. We're choosing a side, and it's not a football game.
How do you and your spouse feel about the security aspect of what you're about to do?
Look, if you ever go to Israel, you understand that the Israelis understand security. I absolutely know. I've been to the West Bank, up and down the West Bank numerous times. I've never once felt an ounce of being personally at risk. I mean, Palestinians, they see me, they know I'm a tourist.
Yeah.
I'm there to spend money. And when I've taken students there, we've stayed in the West Bank. We
Okay.
always stay in Palestinian hotels. They need the money more than the Israelis do. So I don't feel personally at risk. I just try not to think about it, because I kind of think about, like, I'm not going to be bullied out of going to learn,
That's a good way of looking at it.
and it's important. And so I'm just, if this is how you learn, and I've
Yeah.
learned so much because I spend a significant amount of time in this region. This is
Yeah.
not my research area, but I've been able to kind of self-educate where I can have I know what I'm talking about in this conflict, and so I'm just not going to think about the security, because I've always felt safe over there, whether I'm in Israel or Palestine.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid, because I'm not the target.
Well, first of all, I'll worry enough for you
Yeah.
while you're gone. But secondly, it's what you were talking about earlier. It's making one of the hard choices
That's
in
right.
life, a choice that is a choice of integrity, to do the right thing, to learn, to grow, to put yourself in a place where you can be part of the solution. So all of that is very much admirable, and a step or a witness to an example of what it is like for the average American to live that life. I'm going to go to a place that I'm amazed that not everybody that we're talking to right now at this moment has been a fan of The Lord of the Rings.
Okay.
I love The Lord of the Rings.
You aren't the only one, brother.
And The Lord of the Rings focuses, and and I talk to people like, I just assume everybody's seen it or read it, but no, that's not the case. So I'm an elitist when it comes to Lord of the Rings, but there is this aspect of The Lord of the Rings that's about the little guy. The hobbits are little people.
That's right.
Purposely, the little guy doing the really hard things in life to overcome the selfishness that is at the heart of all of us, and the battles, the inner battles that we go through in order to do the right thing, which allows us to go home to our homes and to the Shire, in the case of the hobbits, and live our lives ordinarily and in peace. That's where the battle lies today, and Trumpism and the corruption of our political institutions, the growing power of just a small group of people worldwide. I mean, Kushner is making money with the Saudis and the Russian oligarchs, and Putin and Trump, and they're all connected. It's a small group of people that influence politics all over the world for their own good, and almost exclusively for their own good, without regard for everybody else. So that requires us, the everybody else's, to do what the hobbits did, and to do our small part of living with integrity. It's one of the things that very much impresses me about your choice to go over there.
Yeah, yeah. The Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, people going for that brass ring or that iron throne.
Yeah.
And what it does to people when they have access to that power.
Yeah.
I think in many ways, I mean, obviously when people write stuff like this, it is based on, actual acts of power and the actual trajectory of power. It's interesting. With the Gaza thing, I wanted to come back to you, Chuck, because I always check in as this Israel and Palestinian war continues. What are you hearing from the pastoral, the church community? Because I know that this is like the territory that they keep their eye on.
Mostly, it fuzzes over into the Christian nationalism stuff, because there's an aspect of the Christian church that is so pro-Israel, partly because of their take on the end times theologies, and Israel plays a prominent role. And there are even some who are talking about things that we can do to hasten the coming of the apocalypse and Jesus returning, and that is scary to me. But that's one aspect of it. Nothing but pro-Israel, taking a side. That's what we got to do, Jesus calls us to take the side of righteousness, but then there are those who see it in a more nuanced and balanced way, and understand that there's suffering going on in Israel and there's suffering going on in Palestine, and that we're all human beings in this together. We're all children of God, and so how do we help everybody? How do we make a better world? But a lot of those pastors are saying nothing because it's just too scary. You were talking about losing your job by being a person of integrity. It's really hard for pastors, because you step out to your pulpit on Sunday morning and you look out, and you have a congregation that's filled with people from across the spectrum, at least in many of the churches that I know and the pastors that I know. So what do you say? Can you challenge those folks who are saying and doing what seem to me to be crazy things? And I can say these things and do these things as a retired pastor. I'm not going to lose a job. And so for me, there's a certain safety in this. It's one of the reasons I retired a little bit early, is so that I could say these kinds of things. And I had a great congregation, don't get me wrong. They would have listened to me, but they would have put up with me.
Yeah.
But it's really hard when you're a young pastor, especially, to put your living, your lifeline on the line, to potentially lose your job. So your livelihood matters, even if you're a religious person.
Well, I tell you what, I don't know which one I'm looking forward to more, this Tyson and Jake Paul fight, or this first debate with Trump and Biden. I saw a commercial for this first debate, and they're showing these guys side by side, and I kid you not, man, this felt like some parody from the movie Cocoon. I said, this doesn't even look real. This doesn't even look real to see these two very, very old men, which is an honorable thing, and it's a worthy thing. Listen, I hope I live to be in my, upper 70s or 77 or 82, 83. That'd be a blessing, but my God, to have both men in this age, and I'm staring at like, this is what we got.
First of all, I wonder how many of our listeners know the movie Cocoon, because that's aging us.
Oh, yeah.
That's an old movie, but it's about senior citizens.
Oh, yeah. Well, my listeners are hip to Cocoon. I know my radio listeners are, but my podcast listeners may not be, so I'm glad that you say that.
A lot of the people I preach to wouldn't know Cocoon, but it's you're right. Here we are talking about, we got to get more young people out there, and we're getting old as a society, and we have an 81-year-old running against a 77-year-old in this election. There's a little bit of craziness there, but it's what we have.
The selfishness of not giving up power. Joe Biden would have been the most celebrated American of the 21st century had he walked away from the presidency after one term and let the Democratic Party doesn't, as a historian of the Democratic Party, this is something the Democrats do well. is to find somebody that nobody's heard of, right? Who kind of represents the zeitgeist. You know,
Yeah.
a Barack Obama, a John Kennedy. I just so regret, because I know my students in 2020, they were like, they were very depressed by their choices, and I know they're just going to be so deflated.
Yeah.
You know, because they Joe Biden shares kind of nothing with them in terms of kind of a cultural sensibility.
Yeah. This is strictly a rumor. But I've heard it on multiple fronts from credible people. The first time I heard it, I'm like, well, that's an interesting rumor. And then I heard it again from another credible source. And then I heard it again from a credible source. I keep hearing about some announcement potentially about Josh Shapiro at the Democratic National Convention.
Huh. You mean as a
to
replace Biden as the candidate?
That's what I'm hearing, and I'm hearing that Josh Shapiro's been at the White House a lot. And is there a baton being passed here? I don't know.
He'd win 55% of the vote.
Yeah, I don't know, because what I do know is I think that they have to figure that out. As much as I love, the fact that they put Kamala Harris in there, I've said this before, I think they struggle with people seeing her as president, and whoever the vice president is, there is a realistic possibility that this person could become president by hook or by crook before this next term is over.
Wow.
Right? And so often said I would see if it was constitutionally allowed to put Barack in as vice president. I mean, if Trump can say, is it allowed?
Yeah.
Tell me it's constitutionally, well, he doesn't care if it's constitutionally allowed or not, so I take that back. But I said they have to figure out a way to restructure this. And I'm hearing this, and so I'm anxious to see, is there truth to it? And if so, how's this going to play out? Because they do need to shake things up. It is still neck and neck, even though there's so much dirt on this side of the It doesn't matter, it seems like.
Yeah. What do you think, Jeff? Are we going to get a Josh Shapiro vice presidency?
I don't know. I don't know.
When I said I was thinking as president, he'd win 55%. They absolutely have to shake things up. And, Josh Shapiro as vice president would shake things up. I think it would be an improvement over the ticket. Kamala Harris, look, she's from California. She's great for California politics, but California is not America.
Yeah.
And, and Josh Shapiro, right, winning Pennsylvania, this is somebody who can help woo Michigan and Wisconsin voters. It might be unfair to Vice President Harris, but they need to shake something up. I was thinking, maybe Biden would. That's not going to happen. To step away at this point, but that's interesting. I mean, this is, if you are wanting Joe Biden to win, that's the kind of news you want to hear.
And I was hearing these rumors before the Hunter Biden news came in. And listen, we are seeing so much unprecedented news being made on a day-to-day basis, it feels like, when it comes to the political scene. I look at this man's age. He has lost his wife dramatically. He's lost his oldest son. His other son is suffering with addiction. He's now been convicted. And when you listen to the trial, that son ends up through relationship, the widow of Beau Biden ends up getting addicted to crack from running behind Hunter Biden. They end up in a sexual relationship as they're both getting out. This thing is messy.
Yeah.
And if I'm this 82-year-old man who has accomplished everything politically I've ever set out to accomplish, I would be seriously contemplating that very thing. I got this young buck over here.
Yeah.
He could 100% carry it. Am I willing to have a stroke in office for the sake of what? When everything I'm doing and saying isn't moving the needle as my world is falling down around me.
Yeah.
There's a strong possibility. This is why I'm even mentioning it on air, because I think there's a strong possibility that something groundbreaking could happen at the Democratic National Convention.
We can only hope.
A convention with actual news?
Wouldn't that
this
be
hasn't
something?
happened in a generation. It would be exciting. I mean, it would shake up the race. This is what American politics should be. People feel that everything is predetermined, and then they think their voice doesn't matter.
Yep.
Right. And this would be, an indication that the Democrats are listening to Americans. Right. 75% of Americans don't want this rematch.
Yeah.
Right. Like, listen to what voters are saying, and they're saying they don't want this rematch, even if it's just as the VP. At least it's something different.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Chuck, this may be one of those situations where we got to pack our bags.
Yeah,
remember, listen, we
man.
bought this setup pre-COVID.
Yep.
And the goal of the Public's Voice when we first started it was to go where news was being made.
Yeah.
This is why we have this portable setup.
Yeah.
And I had to tell you, man, at both these conventions, you may have to have the fold-out table somewhere.
Oh, man.
Like, hey,
Well, we going to Milwaukee?
come talk to us. Milwaukee is driving distance.
It is. It is. Where's the Democratic
I have
convention
to,
this
I have
year?
to look at it. What's it?
Jeff, you got to know this. If you don't know this,
Yeah, I don't. Off the top of my head,
We are
look, this is
tickling.
how little the conventions matter these
exactly
days,
right. I
you
should know this, but I don't know this.
Yeah, I mean,
It's the marvelous side of technology and the pervasiveness of social media that we can look it up real quickly.
Yeah,
But
I would assume it would be in a swing state.
That would make sense.
If Democrats are smart, but that's always the
that's a caveat we don't know. We get.
oh yeah, we're in Chicago, so we got
Oh, that's of course
Really?
next
Chicago.
door,
They're afraid of
Chicago
it.
and Milwaukee.
They're afraid of a 1968 redux with the protesters.
Wow,
Yeah,
man!
we'll
Next,
convene
next
in
2.0 at
Chicago.
Milwaukee. I mean, that might be scarier than going to Gaza. To go to Milwaukee.
Well, we will see what's going. I mean, Democrats are quite afraid, and rightfully so, that the campus protests that we're seeing, they're going to descend upon the Chicago convention. And again, it's another look. Politics is the last reason you want the war to be over.
Yeah.
But if you're a Democrat, you really want this war to be over
Yeah.
because you don't want the protests because the optics will just be terrible.
Tin soldiers and Nixon coming.
Yeah,
We're fine. 1968 Chicago was it the Democrat or the Republican convention?
It was the
in
Democratic
68?
convention.
Yeah.
they'll be right door to each other, man.
Yeah.
What's Milwaukee and Chicago?
Repeating history.
Yeah,
Wow.
the Bears and the Packers rivalry, resurrects
Wild.
itself in the form of politics.
Man, we got so much more to talk about. And Jeff, we're going to have you back when you're done with your
Absolutely.
trip because that's just so fascinating and so telling about the world in which we live today. So I'm anxious to hear how that trip goes. Meantime, while you're away, we'll have your wife on. How long you gone?
10 days.
It's not too bad.
So
Yeah, 10
not
days.
not too long enough to see a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, listen, gentlemen, this was good. There's a lot going on, and I'm with Chuck. We need the update when you get back. We need to report, see what was going on. I love to hear these firsthand narratives from things where the news and history is being made in real time so rapidly. I mean, this is something that people will talk about decades from now, if we exist.
If we're still a democracy.
I'm the doomsday guy. We're still a democracy 100 years from now. This will be talked about a great deal. But thank you for joining us on the fly, at the local coffee shop. Chuck, thank you for, making sure that we have a spot here because I know this is your joint.
Yeah, this is my place. It's my kid's place.
Yeah, this is your joint.
Brouhaha in the Colony Plaza, just to put the plug in.
Plug it, man.
Come
Plug it.
here. Great conversations take place here.
Brouhaha can send that check to Next 2.0. That's it.
That's right.
But listen, that's it for our show today. Tune in next time for more discussion and analysis with local and national guests. Remember, the Next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms and the fourth Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. And that airs on WQLN PBS NPR, which is 91.3 FM. If you want to leave your message or a text message or a voice message about your thoughts on the show, thoughts for future shows, you can call 814-240-8816 to the Next 2.0 hotline. And Marcus Atkinson, and on behalf of my man Chuck Camerata, and thanking Jeff Bloodworth again for coming to the show, we say thank you for joining in. Come join us next time so you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.